I have some fascinating video to dig into today. Donald Trump has been having trouble on the issue of race lately. Donald Trump's reaction to huge national protests against police brutality after George Floyd was killed by police was to say, send in more force and have the military dominate the protesters. That was the word he used last week or the week before on a call with governors. So it's obviously not going well for Trump on race. Donald Trump is polling 8% with black voters, 8%, according to a new CNN poll. So someone got the bright idea. Let's send Trump to be interviewed on Fox News, but not by one of their ubiquitous white blonde anchors. Have black woman Harris Faulkner interview Donald Trump. This is going to be great. It's going to help him with black voters. It was absolutely and utterly insane. And I want to look at some clips with you today. Here's Trump pulling out the cringeworthy claim about him doing more for black people than any other president. And he weirdly says, let's not include Lincoln in that. Although he adds, it is questionable how much Abraham Lincoln really did for black people, to which even Fox News anchor Harris Faulkner has to say, well, we are free, Mr. President. Like Lincoln freed the slaves. You've done more for us. Check out this first clip and strap in, folks, because it's going to be wild.
Yeah. In general, I mean, the economy is the great unifier, right?
Well, I think I've done more for the black community than any other president. And let's take a pass on Abraham Lincoln because he did good, although it's always questionable. You know, in other words, the end result.
Well, we are free, Mr. President.
But we
he
are
did
free.
pretty well.
You understand what I mean?
Yeah, no,
so I'm going to
it.
take a pass on Abe, Honest Abe, as we call him.
But you say you've done.
Absolutely bizarre. This is the president talking like this. And he doesn't even have the historical understanding to be able to recognize how cringy this is. Like, it's total cringe, but he doesn't get it because he lacks historical knowledge. Trump, who has defended Confederate monuments, says he's done more for black people than any other president. So then we get into the meat of it, as it were, related to the protests. And Donald Trump says, and this really requires some deep thinking to know, what on earth is this guy talking about? Trump says that police chokeholds as a concept are innocent and perfect. Innocent and perfect. And then he totally dissembles into nonsense.
I really am. And I think the concept of chokehold sounds so innocent, so perfect. And then you realize if it's a one-on-one, now if it's two-on-one, that's a little bit of a different story, depending on the toughness and strength. You know, we're talking about toughness and strength. We are talking, there's a physical thing here also. But if a police officer is in a bad scuffle and he's got somebody,
Well, if it's a one-on-one fight for the life,
yeah, and that does happen, and that does happen.
But
too. So you have to be careful.
What is he talking about? I'm not asking rhetorically. What is he talking about? Now, understand that there are lots of Republicans who will say only 8% of black voters support Trump because they've been somehow tricked by Democrats or they've fallen for something, which implicitly suggests black voters are dumb, that they've been tricked by Democrats. Watch this interview and you understand why Trump is polling 8% with black voters. Here's more about chokeholds. Trump saying sometimes bad people, something chokeholds are good. That's, I mean, I have a hard time making more sense out of it than that.
Say no
and
to
I don't want to see
chokeholds?
mistakes. Yeah, I don't like chokeholds. Now, I will say this. As somebody that, you know, you grow up and you wrestle and you fight and or you see what happens. Sometimes if you're alone and you're fighting somebody who's tough and you get somebody in a chokehold, what are you going to do? Say, oh, and it's a real bad person, and you know that. And they do exist. I mean, we have some real bad people. You saw that during the last couple of weeks. You saw some very good people protesting, but you saw some bad people also. And you get somebody in a chokehold, and what are you going to do now? Let go and say, oh, let's start all over again. I'm not allowed to have you in a chokehold. It's a tough situation. Now, if you have two people,
or
and in the
four.
case that we're talking about,
Right.
you had four people.
Yeah.
And two of them, I guess, just pretty much started.
So
it's a very tricky situation. But
that's an
so the
interesting
chokehold
point.
thing is good because off the cuff it would sound like absolutely. But if you're thinking about it, then you realize maybe there is a bad fight, and the officer gets somebody in a position that's
so
a very tough
you say it's
position.
a sliding scale depending on what the circumstances
I
are.
think you have to probably say.
Do you want to be in that conversation?
It's just not of this world. There's nothing there. There's no substance there to even really analyze. Another absolutely Looney Tunes moment from this interview. they get into the phrase Trump used: when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Trump used this phrase during the protests recently. The origins are a guy named Walter Headley, the police chief of Miami, Florida, who said it in the 60s when there was a violent outbreak of crime. And it has a horribly racist history. It was positioned against the battle for civil rights in the country at the time. And Trump was asked about the origins, and he kind of plays dumb. He's like, well, other people also said it, like Philly Police Commissioner Frank Rizzo used the term. Now, Rizzo did not actually use the term, but he did encourage brutal police tactics. And Trump just kind of says, like, well, Rizzo also said it, which is not technically true. And then it gets just really awkward. If you have an aversion to awkwardness, I would maybe skip the next 2 minutes.
Me and I'm Paris on TV, but I'm a black woman. Yeah. I'm a mom. And, you know, and you've talked about it, but we haven't seen you come out and be that consoler in this instance. And the tweets, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Why those words?
So that's an expression I've heard over the years. And it
Do you know
really
where it comes
from? I think Philadelphia, the mayor of Philadelphia, from what
it comes from 1967. I was about 18 months old at the time. Everybody's shooting Wiki because they probably got it wrong. But it was from the chief of police in Miami. He was cracking down, and he meant what he said. And he said, I don't even care if it makes it look like brutality. I'm going to crack down when the looting starts, the shooting starts. Yeah. That frightened a lot of people when you tweeted
Well, it
that.
also comes from a very tough mayor who I might have been police commissioner at the time, but I think mayor of Philadelphia named Frank Rizzo. And he had an expression like that. But I've heard it many times from, I think it's been used many times. It means two things, very different things. One is if there's looting, there's probably going to be shooting. And that's not as a threat. That's really just a fact because that's what happens. And the other is if there's looting, there's going to be shooting. They're very different meanings.
Oh, interesting.
No, there's very different meanings. But I think
Do you think most people see it that way?
I think they see it both ways. No, I mean, I've had it viewed both ways. I think it's meant both ways.
Can anybody understand what he's talking about? Like, literally, what is he saying? I'm feeling like my grammatical knowledge of English is not up to par to properly parse what Donald Trump is trying to say here. So let's now go backwards a little bit. I'm going to go back to the start of the interview with Harris Faulkner. And Trump characterizes the protests really as riots and unnecessary. Of course, they were mostly peaceful protests, and they were totally warranted given the inaction on police brutality for so long. Just completely dismissive Trump is of the entire movement. Not exactly an opportunity for a big coup with black voters.
It's happened in the last couple of weeks. I feel like we are at one of those historical moments where future generations will look back and they'll decide who we were. Are you the president to unite all of us, given everything that's happening right now?
Well, I certainly think so, and I certainly hope so. And the relationships we have are incredible. The spirit of this country, and especially considering what happened. I mean, we had out of nowhere a plague come in from China. It just came in, and it came to all over the world. It went all over the world. You look at it, 186 countries, and they were devastated. And we were certainly hit very hard. Some were hit harder than us, relatively, but we were hit very, very hard. And now we're making our comeback. And then on top of it, we had the riots, which were unnecessary to the extent they were. If the governors and mayors would have taken a stronger action, I think the riots would have been, you could call them protesters, you could call them riots. They were different nights, different things.
Says riots again, says you could call them protests, but they're really riots. And then following up this dismissiveness with even more, remember, they sat him in front of black Fox News anchor Harris Faulkner, I guess as part of the optics here. And he just says horrible things. Here, Trump says lots of the protesters didn't even know why they were protesting, which is just completely dismissive of the movement.
When he called out mom on that tape, it's a heart punch. So I'm curious from you, what do you think the protesters, not the looters and the rioters, we're intelligent enough to know the difference in our country,
sure.
Right? What do you think they want? What do you think they need right now from you?
So I think you had protesters for different reasons, and then you had protesting also because, they just didn't know. I watched it very closely. Why are you here? And they really weren't able to say, but they were there for a reason, perhaps. But a lot of them really were there because they're following the crowd. A lot of them were there because what we witnessed was a terrible thing. What we saw was a terrible thing. And we've seen it over the years. We haven't, this was one horrible example, but you've seen other terrible examples. You know that better than anybody would know it.
Yes, black woman Harris Faulkner would know better than anyone. But again, protesters didn't know why they were there, according to Donald Trump. So listen, you can find people who were out there who were just trying to cause trouble or going with the crowd. But the answer is the overwhelmingly peaceful protests were there because of police brutality. You say that first, not as an aside or at the end. Completely disastrous interview. But to totally level with you, I don't know that it matters. Anybody who would be disgusted with this interview is already not voting for Donald Trump. Anybody who just watches Fox News and gets in line and is planning to vote for Trump is going to vote for him anyway, regardless of this interview. So we've got to hit that slice who might change their minds. And I don't know that many of those folks are actually going to see this interview. It's tragic. It's sad because this is really exposing the lack of critical thinking and sort of thoughtfulness and introspection that Donald Trump experiences, a total lack of. And if you really sit down and listen to each of his answers, you understand the guy understands nothing. He just knows nothing. He doesn't even, he's there for a particular reason. There's a reason that with what's going on, he's being interviewed by Harris Faulkner, and he still fails to keep it together in the way that this type of strategy would hope that he would be able to do. Just absolutely insane. We're going to have more clips from this interview on the David Pakman Show Instagram, which is at David Pakman Show. On my Instagram, david.pakman, you can see me at a socially distanced outdoor cafe over the weekend. An incredible moment. I just sat down outside somewhere, and it felt like a huge thing. That's on my Instagram, david.pakman. We'll take a quick break and be back after this. What a crazy weekend. It's good to be back, and there's so much to talk about. We have a big media story, free speech story, censorship story. Actually, it's really just a media story. Advertisers are fleeing Fox News propagandist Tucker Carlson's program. Why? Because of constantly racially charged and, quite frankly, boring and predictable nonsense that is totally toxic. And right away, the whole, I don't really understand the First Amendment crowd is out in force defending Tucker Carlson against First Amendment, not Second Amendment, First Amendment misunderstandings and so-called charges of censorship. But what we're actually seeing is the marketplace of ideas that these right-wingers claim to want. And I'm going to get to that a little bit later after explaining to you what took place. Being associated with Tucker Carlson's program is bad for some advertisers in the marketplace, and they are making the decision to bail. So just the other day, Tucker Carlson said on his show, the protests aren't really about Black lives, and that ominously, they will come for you. It wasn't clear when he said it if he meant Black people or who. Later claimed that he meant, Democrats, I guess. Here's what he had to say.
This may be a lot of things, this moment we're living through, but it is definitely not about Black lives. And remember that when they come for you, and at this rate, they will. Anyone who's ever been subjected to the rage of the mob knows the feeling. It's like being swarmed by hornets. You cannot think clearly.
A bunch of companies that had been advertising on Tucker Carlson's program decided to pull their advertising because of that and other clips. It wasn't just one thing, apparently. This includes Disney. This includes Papa John's Pizza, which is historically a horrible, horrible company, a T-Mobile, Poshmark, and some other brands. So in a second, we're going to talk about the free speech and censorship component to this because the misunderstandings that are floating around are disturbing in terms of the lack of understanding of anything related to speech and censorship that they portray. But I want to be really extra super clear about something here. I said this is just business, and this is just business. It's a market decision that's being made by these companies. Papa John's said they are deciding to stop all advertising on opinion shows in general. It's not that they're particularly upset with what Tucker said. They're making a business decision to pull advertising from all opinion programs. The other advertisers, are the Papa John's and other advertisers, they're not bailing on Fox News. They're not saying the problem is that Fox is so harebrained that they allow Tucker Carlson a platform to say this stuff. They're just moving from Tucker Carlson to other Fox News shows that are less under the microscope. Fox News said that these departures aren't causing a financial hit because it's just moving money from Tucker's show to other shows. So these are not political decisions in general, in the sense that these are companies that are still okay sending money to Fox News, and they are okay with Fox News carrying water in general for Donald Trump and the terrible ideas espoused by Donald Trump and by the network. But they're not going to do it on Tucker Carlson's show because it's just become a negative attention getter, so to speak. So now that gets us to the First Amendment free speech component, which for me is really the most interesting thing. A whole bunch of Trump supporting right wingers are saying this is censorship of Tucker Carlson. There's a free speech violation, First Amendment, fill in the blanks with your generic censorship concern trolling language. And then let's debunk these claims one by one. First of all, this has nothing to do with the First Amendment. This is the participants here are advertisers, a TV channel, and a TV host and the audience. First Amendment is not a factor here. The government is not abridging anyone's speech whatsoever. So First Amendment into the trash, out the window. Second, this is how capitalism and the marketplace of ideas works. Understand that there's no coercion happening here. There's, the non-aggression principle, people should be pleased. Tucker Carlson can choose, I guess he's allowed to say whatever he wants on his program, and that may have repercussions. Fox News is totally free, no coercion. Fox News can choose to employ Tucker or not. They may have a particular contract with him where if they pull him off the air, they still got to pay him, but they and Tucker Carlson agreed on that contract with no government intervention. Advertisers can choose to advertise on any show they want or not to for any reason. They can say, I don't like the suits that Tucker Carlson wears, or I don't like what Tucker Carlson says. They are free to decide however they want to or not to advertise on any particular program. Viewers like you can choose to watch or not watch Tucker Carlson. Viewers can choose to contact advertisers and say, if you advertise with Tucker, I will no longer buy your stuff. Or they could say, unless you advertise with Tucker, I won't buy your stuff. Everybody's free to do whatever they want, period. And interestingly, the advertiser can choose, again, non-aggression, no coercion. If you're an advertiser and people start writing to you saying, you'd better stop advertising with Tucker, or you'd better start advertising with Tucker, either way, the advertiser can choose to listen to those people or not. Everybody gets to make their choices. Now, you're going to hear some people pop up, and they're either ignorant or they're concern trolling. And they will say, if you email a company and say, I will not buy your stuff if you do X or Y, like advertising with Tucker, that's coercion. It's not coercion. It's called speech. There's no violence. It's a marketplace. This is literally what the free marketeers claim to want. I, as a buyer, can choose to buy or not buy a product for any reason that is important to me. I, as a buyer, am free to tell a company why I am buying their product or why I am not buying their product, and the company can choose whether to pay attention to me or whether to tell me to go to hell and do whatever they want. The company can decide, if we advertise with Tucker, we're going to lose 1,000 customers, but we might gain 2,000 because his audience is so big. And that extra 1,000 customers is worth it to us, despite the PR problem that it might cause us to advertise with Tucker Carlson. And they can decide whatever they want. The market is actually regulating itself here without violence or government intervention. The right wingers should be cheering this, but they're not. They want to frame it as a liberal mob trying to hurt someone's ability to earn a living. We don't even know, by the way, whether Tucker's income is affected by the number of advertisers his show has. It may not be. We don't know. They are pathetic and they are predictable and they're so boring. I mean, it's getting so old that they either don't understand or pretend not to understand how markets and free speech and censorship actually work. Okay, so earlier on in the show, I told you about the claims that John Bolton makes in his book, Donald Trump okaying Chinese concentration camps, Trump saying invading Venezuela would be cool, Trump asking China for help getting reelected, Trump saying reporters should be imprisoned or executed, Trump didn't know that the UK had nuclear weapons, on and on and on. We did that earlier in the show. I then told you about the legal battle by Trump's Justice Department to suppress the publication of John Bolton's book, including a footnote provision that is asking courts to ban bookstores from selling Bolton's book under threat of punishment or legal action. So we already did all of that stuff. Now I want to talk about Donald Trump's reaction. Donald Trump, predictably, was so triggered by what is in John Bolton's book that he absolutely exploded both on television and on Twitter. It's been going for almost 24 hours now. We just had to add more tweets to this story because Trump just won't stop tweeting. So here is Trump kicking it off last night with Sean Hannity, Fox News propagandist, total disinformation, whitewashing attempt of the entire story, calling Bolton a washed up criminal. Let's take a look at this clip.
And then in terms of Bolton, he broke the law. He was a washed-up guy. I gave him a chance. He couldn't get Senate confirmed, so I gave him a non-Senate confirmed position where I could just put him there, see how he worked. And I wasn't very enamored. He went into the Middle East. He was one of the big guns for let's go into Iraq, and that didn't work out too well, and I was against that a long time ago before I was ever even thinking about doing what I'm doing now. But he was one of the people who wanted to go to Iraq. When I asked him about it, I said, about a month in, when he was about a month in, I said, what do you think? You think you made a mistake there? No, I don't think so. I said, explain that one. So the terrible thing that he did. But he broke the law. Very simple. I mean, as much as it's going to be broken, this is highly classified. That's the highest stage. It's highly classified information, and he did not have approval.
So this is amazing. Trump says both that Bolton's claims are lies and that they're classified. If they're lies, how are they classified? It's made up stuff, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And Trump's also funny because he says Bolton was bad because he went into Iraq. And Trump hired him 15 years later knowing that. Doesn't Trump say he hires the best people? So Trump making no sense. If it's lies, how are they classified? If you hire the best people, why did you hire someone that is so terrible? And then the real triggering, Trump clearly sitting there fermenting with his phone, tweet after embarrassing tweet. And I want to look at a couple of these with you. Donald Trump retweeting right-wing disinformation propagator Dinesh D'Souza, who attacked Bolton. Donald Trump adding to D'Souza's tweet, President Bush fired him also. Bolton is incompetent. Trump calling Bolton a wacko and a dope, tweeting, quote, Wacko John Bolton's exceedingly tedious book is made up of lies and fake stories. Said all good about me in print until the day I fired him, a disgruntled, boring fool who only wanted to go to war, never had a clue, was ostracized and happily dumped. What a dope. And I go back again. If they're lies, how is it a problem that Bolton is publishing classified information? If he's making it all up, it by definition couldn't be classified because it doesn't really exist, right? Trump kept going this morning, completely out of control, saying, quote, Bolton's book, which is getting terrible reviews, is a compilation of lies and made up stories, all intended to make me look bad. Many of the ridiculous statements he attributes to me were never made, pure fiction, just trying to get even for firing him like the sick puppy he is. And again, if it's all lies, why are you suppressing it on the basis of it being classified? And then a two-tweet series where he says, quote, when wacko John Bolton went on Deface the Nation and so stupidly said that he looked at the Libyan model for North Korea, all hell broke out. Kim Jong-un, who we were getting along with very well, went ballistic just like his missiles, and rightfully so. He didn't want Bolton anywhere near him. Bolton's dumbest of all statements set us back very badly with North Korea even now. I asked him, what the hell were you thinking? He had no answer and just apologized. That was early on. I should have fired him right then and there. Now, we could do an hour on Trump with North Korea and his delusions. The real problem with North Korea was Trump falling for the same stuff that North Korean leaders have been doing and saying for 30 years. Trump actually believed it, right? Other presidents, both Democratic and Republican, knew that they shouldn't fall for the idiotic and unbelievable claims from North Korean leaders. Trump fell for them, so Trump thought he was making progress. So, I mean, I don't even know where to start all of this, right? Fox's position has been to get experts on saying Bolton's book endangers our national security by putting out classified and secret information. Well, Trump says it's all lies. So how can lies be secret and classified? At the same time, the real risk to our national security all along has been Donald Trump. Remember, Trump once tweeted what should have been a classified and remained classified satellite photo. National security means nothing to Trump. Trump once had a meeting with Russians in the Oval Office and shared Israeli intelligence with them, which he had not been given the okay to share, which endangered an actual important source of information about ISIS, for example, which Donald Trump claimed to be fighting very, very strongly about. So if you want to talk about endangering national security and playing fast and loose with what should be secret and classified information, and I say should because I understand legally Trump can declassify whatever he wants, doesn't mean it's smart or prudent to do it. Really, it's Trump we need to be looking at. And again, I have a tweet about this, which you can look at. I'm D. Pakman on Twitter. How is it that Trump is furious that Bolton is both lying, but that what he writes in the book is classified information? If they are lies, it doesn't exist. It's made up, and therefore being classified wouldn't actually be a problem. I'm sure that the Trumpists will find some way to excuse that completely incoherent claim. But it is not making too much sense. Now, let's dig in. I've been building to this. Bolton deserves huge criticism for what he did to some degree, and that's where we're going to go next. Okay, so in the last 24 hours, the health questions about Donald Trump have appeared, not just on Fox News, as we already talked about, but the health questions around Trump have also become a focus of a new ad from the Republican PAC, Republican Political Action Committee, called the Lincoln Project. Now, we've talked about the Lincoln Project a little bit before. It's a PAC run by some prominent Republicans. This includes George Conway, who, by the way, is the husband of Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway. Steve Schmidt is part of the Lincoln Project, former McCain campaign manager, Rick Wilson, and other prominent Republicans. They are a Republican PAC that realizes Trump is a danger and must be removed. Their ads have been going after Trump harder and harder. And yesterday they released an ad that goes after Donald Trump on the topic of his health. Again, raising questions about Trump's behavior over the weekend at West Point, linking Trump's behavior to the last minute visit to Walter Reed Medical Center in 2019. So let's look at the ad. Let's listen to the ad. Now, some of these elements are visual, like, for example, you'll hear voiceover and they are showing Donald Trump acting bizarrely. So I do recommend watching this online, but you'll get a sense of the story that's being told from the narration. Let's take a look.
Something's wrong with Donald Trump. He's shaky, weak, trouble speaking, trouble walking. So why aren't we talking about this? And why isn't the press covering Trump's secretive midnight run to Walter Reed Medical Center? Why do so many reporters who cover the White House pretend they can't see Trump's decline? The most powerful office in the world needs more than a weak, unfit, shaky president. Trump doesn't have the strength to lead, nor the character to admit it. We're not doctors, but we're not blind. It's time we talk about this. Trump is not well.
So this is really quite well done. Even the details, down to the details, it's very good. At one point when the voiceover says we're not doctors, what you see in the ad is Trump's old doctor, Harold Bornstein, on screen. That's the guy that Donald Trump allegedly coerced into writing that bogus letter about how healthy Donald Trump is. So we are now seeing this, I guess we would call it a sort of hashtag movement. Trump is not well is the name of it. And it's going much more mainstream than it ever has. It's happening thanks to right-wing media. It's happening thanks to a Republican political action committee. And to go back to the analysis, this is not about Republicans are now going to be widely concerned about Donald Trump's health. That's not going to happen. The importance of this is that there are large swaths of the American population that don't even know that there's been a conversation about Trump's health happening for 3 years. There's large portions of the electorate that have no idea that dozens of medical experts, both from the neurology field and mental health fields, have been expressing concern about Donald Trump's health for years because they watch Fox News and they only follow Republicans on social media. They don't know about Trump's verbal glitches, his wandering off that time when he came off of Air Force One. His limo was right in front of him. He wandered off, had to be brought back by Secret Service, losing his train of thought, sweating with the dilated pupils while speaking, upper Trump versus downer Trump. They don't know about it. So even hearing about this as a thing on Fox News and through a Republican PAC is introducing it into their awareness. Now, 99% of them won't care. But remember that in 2016, the election came down to 75,000 votes in 3 states. We will mostly win if we get the turnout, but we'll take any help we can get. And if it's a Republican PAC and Fox News asking even some questions about Donald Trump's health, you might convince a few people and we will take it. Now, there are reports about this ad being controversial. For example, there's an article this morning in The Week, which is called New Lincoln Project Ad Controversially Questions Trump's Health. It's not really controversial if you've been following this for years. And there's a debate happening in this article and elsewhere asking whether Trump's health is fair game. Now, one argument is, listen, Trump mocked a disabled reporter. He calls Joe Biden Sleepy Joe and says Joe Biden doesn't even know what he's saying. He is regularly implying Joe Biden is cognitively impaired. So that makes Trump's health fair game. I disagree with that assessment. The reason Trump's health is fair game is because he's the president, and we have reason to believe that he's lying about his health. His medical report lied about his height and weight combination. He allegedly coerced a doctor to write a letter saying Trump would be the healthiest president in history. It's an empirical claim that no doctor could actually make. So I understand the concern from disability rights groups worried that this is bordering on making fun of health issues. That is not what this is about. This is about understanding the critical nature of being president. And when you have a president that, number one, seems unwell, and number two, is dishonest about everything, including his height and weight, we are absolutely right to be concerned. That's really what this is fundamentally about. Donald Trump recently said that bigotry and prejudice are going to leave very easily and quickly from the United States, just hours after using a racial slur himself against a sitting Democratic senator. You probably know that Trump has a long history of claiming that certain problems are going to be really easy to fix. You might remember that he said coronavirus was just going to leave in April. It's going to wash through and leave like a miracle. Obviously, that didn't happen. He also said 3.5 years ago that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was going to very easily and quickly fix the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Obviously, that has not happened. And here is Donald Trump speaking at a so-called transition to greatness event, saying it himself, bigotry will leave quickly and easily, just hours after he tweeted the slur Pocahontas about Senator Elizabeth Warren. Here is Donald Trump himself saying it.
Americans are good and virtuous people. We have to work together to confront bigotry and prejudice wherever they appear, but we'll make no progress and heal no wounds by falsely labeling tens of millions of decent Americans as racist or bigots. We have to get everybody together. We have to be in the same path, I think, Pastor. If we don't do that, we have problems, and we'll do that. We'll do it. I think we're going to do it very easily. It'll go quickly, and it'll go very easily.
So it's so part of the solution to bigotry and racism, Trump says, is to stop calling people racist when they say racist things. And then racism will very quickly leave our country. And remember, just hours before Trump said this, he tweeted a slur about Elizabeth Warren, where he said, quote, seriously failed presidential candidate Senator Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren just introduced an amendment on the renaming of many of our legendary military bases from which we trained to win 2 world wars. Hopefully, our great Republican senators won't fall for this. Also relevant to racism and bigotry is that Donald Trump was attacking Elizabeth Warren because she introduced an amendment looking to rename American military bases that were named after pro-slavery Confederate generals. Remember, the Confederacy was fighting to preserve states' rights for legal slavery during the American Civil War. This is the same Donald Trump who told 4 American congresswomen of color to go back to their countries. This is the same Trump who referred to African countries as, you know what? Obviously, Donald Trump, as we know, is in way over his head and himself is a heavily bigoted individual. But I want to put you in his shoes for a moment, as gross as that might feel. If you don't have any understanding of bigotry and racism, if you don't understand the history of bigotry and racism in the United States, as Donald Trump doesn't understand, if you don't understand how long bigotry and racism have been around in the United States and how ingrained in the country they are, you might believe that you could really quickly and easily fix bigotry and racism. In reality, what's going on is that Donald Trump completely lacks self-awareness and is himself a huge part of the problem. In general, when Trump is wrong about something or makes a mistake, which he never admits to, of course, you can usually chalk it up to a combination of him being what we might call a bad person, like he lacks empathy completely. You can chalk it up to him being ignorant. Some would call it stupid, but that's a bit of a pejorative. Ignorant maybe is better. And or that he's delusional. In other words, he lives in a fantasy world that includes delusions of grandeur, etc. In this case, Trump saying bigotry will leave quickly and easily. It's a lack of empathy for the problems with bigotry in our country, combined with ignorance about the history of bigotry and racism in the United States, with the addition of the delusion he holds that he can fix any problem. It's sort of like the perfect trifecta. Now, one last thing. I know that some of you lovely right-wingers are going to write to me or leave a comment on YouTube or tweet me, and you're going to say, David, Pocahontas isn't a slur. It was somebody's name. Skip it. Skip. I'm not going to respond to you. I'll tell you right now. Donald Trump is using it as a slur here to sarcastically refer to what in her family was an oral history of Native American ancestry. This is sort of like if you sarcastically or pejoratively refer to a Jewish person as Shlomo when Shlomo is not their name, you would have these same right-wingers going, David, Shlomo is just short for Solomon. It's just a name. How is it a slur? The context matters, and the context can make it a slur. So please, guys, right-wingers, and it is mostly guys, not women, don't even bother writing to me about it, okay? In the context Trump used it, it was a slur. So Donald Trump delivered a completely bizarre and self-congratulatory and very deranged graduation speech at West Point over the weekend. It was riddled with failed applause lines, but most notably at one point, Donald Trump visibly struggled to raise a glass of water to his mouth and later struggled to walk down a ramp, almost having to be helped down the ramp by a member of the military. Now, I'm going to show you the video and we're going to talk about it, but this is as much a story about right-wing hypocrisy as it is a story about Donald Trump's cognitive and physical state. If Joe Biden did 20% of what Trump did at this speech over the weekend, it would be a week of Fox News and OAN agit trash about Joe Biden has dementia, with Judge Jeanine bringing in someone whose cousin's girlfriend once went to medical school to say that Joe Biden is unfit to lead. If this was Hillary, it would be Hillary Parkinson's times 10 all over again. And yet here they are pretending like there's just nothing to see here other than so-called Trump derangement syndrome. And by the way, Trump derangement syndrome is a term that the right has developed to not have to address criticisms of Donald Trump. You say something about Trump, you have Trump derangement syndrome. It's a way to stop conversation. So first of all, at one point during the speech, Donald Trump goes to drink water, picks up a glass with his right hand, brings it about 80% of the way to his lips. His right hand seemingly could go no higher. He tries moving his mouth down to bring it down enough to get to the glass, couldn't do it, and eventually uses his left hand to very strangely pull the glass towards his mouth and tilt it. It wasn't clear if the problem was with Trump's right arm, with his hand-eye coordination. We just have no idea. But this is not a normal way to drink water, and it's the second time, at least, that we've seen Donald Trump bizarrely drink water in this way. Then the other sort of most notable moment during the speech was Trump descending the ramp at the end of the speech, very gingerly, carefully, like he was about to fall over, very strange. And then he took a sort of hop step at the bottom of the ramp, which he later described as jogging down the last 10 feet, which we'll get to. You'll also notice that the officer gesturing for Trump to leave the stage and then walking next to him implies that the officer was briefed ahead of time. Stay with Trump going down the ramp. So again, we've seen Trump come off of Air Force One, sometimes with the help of an aide. We've seen various versions of this. He just doesn't look stable when he's walking here. So is this the most important thing going on right now? It's not. But again, if this was Joe Biden, it would be a week on right-wing media about how this proves Biden simply cannot be president. It's also aggravated and becomes more interesting by Trump immediately lying about it. Trump tweeting, quote, "The ramp that I descended after my West Point commencement speech was very long and steep." Now, it's not very steep. "Had no handrail and most importantly, was very slippery." It was a sunny day. It was totally dry. There's not really any reason why it would be slippery. And people who were there said it was not slippery. And then Trump saying, "The last thing I was going to do is fall for the fake news to have fun with. Final 10 feet, I ran down to ground level." That's also a lie. Trump sort of took a two-step hop. He did not run 10 feet. So it always attracts more attention and is worse when Trump starts lying about it. There's also a tweet for everything with Trump. Trump once criticized Barack Obama for how he would walk out of Air Force One, tweeting in 2014 that, quote, "Obama should stop running down the stairs when getting off Air Force One. Doesn't look presidential, and at some point he will take a fall." Never happened. And by the way, we have video of Barack Obama on the same ramp that Trump was on. Obama certainly looking very, very spry. Nothing to sneeze at there. So this is all very weird, and we don't really have an explanation, which I'll get back to. The speech was also filled with a ton of really other weird moments. Trump, at one point, attempting to talk about former President Ulysses S. Grant. He called him Ulysses a couple of times.
Vision we lead. We need you to carry on the spirit of the great General Ulysses S. Grant.
That's weird. Then also struggling with the name Douglas MacArthur, seemingly saying MacArthur, really just multiple times.
We need you to be as bold and determined as the immortal General Douglas MacArthur, who knew that the American soldier never ever quits. After leaving the Philippines for Australia at a low point of the Pacific War in 1942, MacArthur famously vowed, "I shall return."
And then maybe the most cringeworthy moment was Trump's failed applause line when he mentioned the 245th birthday of the Army and paused and looked around. It was complete crickets. And then Trump decided to bring up his own birthday. I mean, this is real cringe.
Tomorrow, America will celebrate a very important anniversary, the 245th birthday of the United States Army. Unrelated, going to be my birthday also. I don't know if that happened by accident. Did that happen by accident, please? But it's a great day because of that Army birthday.
So a absolutely embarrassing speech. Now, as far as the medical stuff, Trump couldn't lift a glass of water with his right arm. He seemed when he was walking down that ramp that he was kind of favoring his left side. If someone wanted to speculate about what's going on and that there seems to be a left-right issue here, you would start thinking about stroke. Remember that he was taken on short notice to Walter Reed Hospital that time. They lied and said, oh, he decided to get a jump on his 2020 physical. That was back in 2019. Totally not believable. You start to imagine, because they don't fill in the details, maybe there's something going on here that could be stroke related. Now, remember, it's speculative. We don't know. And the important thing to remember is if it were Biden, they would be saying this video is proof that Biden should be dropping out of the race. Really, really crazy stuff.